You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, a semi-weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Join your host, Steph, on Wednesday mornings to chat about seasons, Sabbats, and all new witchcraft topics to help you make your life more magical. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today to chat. Well, we're going to chat about a number of different topics. I'm going to turn it over to her so she can introduce herself and let you know where you can find her online.
Yeah, hi, Steph. So my name is Jane Barlow, and I just wrote a book that just came out a couple of days ago called Be Your Own Shaman. And basically, the story is this. My dad was a medicinal botanist. He was very well known, and he wrote a book when I was in high school. So this was on medicinal botany. It's been a real treasure for a lot of people, but it's been out of print for more than 40 years. My dad passed away 26 years ago, and I basically carry on his work, and it was really just time for his work to be updated, and I doubled the content. So this is kind of a labor of love, honoring my dad, his legacy, but also bringing out plant medicine and the information to empower people to really just take care of their health the way that Mother Nature intended. I think a lot of people are realizing it's a really good idea to opt out of the medical system as much as you can and be responsible for your own health. And this is the intention, the purpose behind this book that I just wrote. So that's me.
I love it. And the dedication to your dad at the beginning is beautiful. It made me cry.
Oh, thank you. He was way ahead of his time as far as he could have been either a really powerful medicine man way back before modern medicine. And then as the kind of interesting evolving of the way the medical industry has happened, you know, he was kind of caught in the middle of like, I know how to help people heal using plants. But it was not vogue at all when he was around, and he was just this amazing human being. And yeah, so I am so blessed every day to keep his work alive and start. People are interested in this stuff right now. I grew up this way, and this is normal for me, and I raised my kids that way. I keep my grandkids use herbs, but a lot of people are going, holy cow, this is the way we're supposed to take care of ourselves. And it's a really beautiful, it feels like a revival of herbal medicine. So it's beautiful.
It is. I completely agree. And I love this topic. And it's so interesting to me because there are so many like drugs that we're familiar with that are plant-based. They come from some plant and then they turned it into a drug, but the pharmaceutical companies don't want to let you know that because that's their bottom dollar. So
right.
They can't let you know the secret ingredient is actually a plant that you can find in your backyard.
Right. Well, and the thing is the natural start of it always starts from something natural. Like a lot of people know white willow bark is where aspirin came from. But the thing is, you can't patent Mother Nature. So you have to make a synthetic version. But almost every single medicine that we have starts from somewhere in nature. So you're 100% right.
Which I really appreciate the amount of detail that you were able to fit in. And you do have 101 plants in here.
Yeah.
Of like the most healing plants. But even like with that number, you did a great job of making sure each one has like an adequate amount of detail. So for anybody who is, looking to get their hands on this, could you explain a little bit about how the book is set up in terms of chapters and then in terms, because I see how you have it organized here, and in terms of the plant information that's offered?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I have found as a person who loves herbal medicine, and you know what, we tend to gravitate toward information and books that interest us. And as a person who loves this topic, I find that there are some volumes or some books that are so scientific and so detailed in the information that is shared that it's a little hard for a lay person to get through. So the way that I set the book up is there's 15 chapters, and the 15th chapter is actually the preparation, like it's plant identification and taxonomy and plant morphology, and then actual preparation method. Like, so how do I make a tincture or a tea or a poultice or a decoction? Like, how do you actually take it and make things? But then the first 14 chapters are divided into kind of like ailments, like brain health, women's health, digestion, different ailments that you can, say, okay, well, here's a section on pain and inflammation, if this is something I'm dealing with. And then what I wanted to do is I wanted a person who didn't have a lot of knowledge about plants, plant medicine. I wanted them to be able to easily go, okay, here's some plant information. So I'm learning some basic information that covers a broad spectrum of something you might find in a whole volume, but let's boil it down to some information that's like, okay, here's some information about this plant. And then I give you some, some common names. I give you the Latin name might be there. And then I give you a bunch of, when do you harvest it? What time of year do you harvest it? What part of the plant do you use? It's very, very simply laid out. Like you said, there's a big full color picture. And then there's illustrations of every single plant. And what's cool is I have a very talented group of siblings, and one of my siblings drew, my sister, Joni, drew all of the illustrations that are in this book. So that was really cool. So there's an illustration, so you can actually see the full plant as far as the flowers, the leaves, the stems, the root. So you can see what the plant looks like as far as a drawing. And then then it tells you if you are going after some inflammation or pain, this plant is best if you use the leaves and you make it into a tea, or you can even take the leaves and make it into a tincture. So it actually tells you exactly how to use it, and it even tells you how to dose it. So to me, it's just let's lay it out, make it easy to understand and easy to read, so that any person could go, oh, this makes sense to me, and I understand how I might be able to incorporate this into my family and the way we use herbs to take care of our health. So that was kind of my whole plan.
Well, I think you executed it really well. I think that this is very beginner friendly, because I feel like a lot of the listeners have the association, let's say lavender, I know that one appears in your book, that it's associated with sleep, but not necessarily knowing like the why behind it or how to put that into action. So I really appreciate that you have what the plant is for, exactly how to take that, what like the dried flowers that you need to take, how you can strain them, store them, put like the dosage that you should take to help with sleep. I think that's brilliant for beginners because it's really step by step.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. I mean, I think that using herbs intimidates a lot of people. And I also know people who they want to use herbs, but maybe you don't want to go and gather lavender or even grow lavender in your yard so that you have it. Because I know people who have a big flower herb gardens that have all kinds of things that literally they have their apothecary out, their medicine cabinet out in their garden. And there's some people who don't want to do that, but at least they want to understand that they like how lavender works, and how, you could even just go buy dried lavender, and it can be really fun to incorporate these things, especially if you understand there's a meaning and there's such beautiful medicinal benefits, even just by smelling lavender. Just the aromatherapy of lavender makes a huge difference. So yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah, and like you said, the drawings that your sister did are like so helpful, because it was stuff like, even I like work with plants and I do a lot of this and a lot of herbal medicines, and even I was like, that's what a root system is supposed to look like, and like the different pieces, I was like, oh, it makes so much more sense now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. And that was really the beauty of the way my dad did his book. He had 48 plants, and he had a really good friend of his do the plant illustrations. So I kind of took a little bit of the format the way my dad did it, which, it's still actually a book that, you can look on Amazon for it, and you might find a copy for like $300. So it's definitely a collector's item at this point. So I kept those same 48 plants. I just updated them, but the illustrations were so much fun to do. And it just felt like I was channeling my dad. And to have one of my sisters do all the illustrations was like this whole other layer of, honoring our dad. And just, we could feel his presence the whole time we were putting this book together. It was so much fun.
Oh, I love that. It's like a whole family affair. And then your son helped you as well, right?
Yeah, so my son Brian, he's my youngest. I have two boys, and he actually helped me with a lot of the research. So I was just like, okay, I need to put Brian on here too, because at the end of the day, we're all mortal, and this is not all about just me and what I'm bringing to the world. There is something about a collective gathering of spirits and minds, and bringing this kind of education to people. So yes, this was definitely a family affair.
Oh, that is so sweet.
Yeah, I know. And my cute granddaughter, who's 13, she's like, when I grow up, I'm going to work for you too, Grandma.
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Do all the grandkids have an appreciation for plants too?
You know what? I have two grandkids, and they both do. I wish I had 100 more, but I only have two. Um, and yeah, my grandson feels he definitely, they have a cupboard full in their house of the stuff that we make, and that's what they turn to, which is really cool to watch kids who are raised with this kind of taking care of themselves. Like my granddaughter's going through puberty, and she's had some hormonal shifts, and the whole thing that kids go through when they're going through puberty, and she knows exactly what to reach for. She reaches for some good adaptogens, and she reaches for some CBD. And it's really cool to watch kids that are raised with this so intuitively understand that this is how we take care of our health. I mean, I grew up that way, and I raised my kids that way, but it's really interesting to watch in today's world how fast kids gravitate toward this. It just makes so much sense. I mean, they don't fight it at all. In fact, they ask for it. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's how I grew up. I had best of both worlds. My father was a pediatrician, so I was vaccinated, but we also did all of the health stuff. He grew up in India, so we had all of the natural medicines as well. So I'd like best of both worlds.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. I mean, the whole vaccine thing fascinates me, because I think these last 4 years have really shifted the way the world looks at a lot of things.
I think that's absolutely true. And people are taking a much more forward approach in really taking control of their own health and figuring out things for themselves, which is great. That's what I want. I want education for everybody. You need to be your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I've really discovered that what people are realizing is the true sign of intelligence is when you get new information about something, maybe something you hold dear, or you hold as like this sacred cow kind of a thing, where this is a pillar, this is my, I worship at the whatever. And then you get new information, and you're willing to change your mind when you get new information. I mean, to me, this is the sign of true intelligence. And it's hard, because we live in a really kind of egotistical based world. We seem so polarized with politics, and sometimes with religion, when at the end of the day, if we would take the time to really not just talk to each other, even with people we disagree with, but if we would really take the time to say, okay, well, what you're saying goes against everything that I believe. Like, think about people who grew up fully in the medical system, and then they start to realize, oh, well, I can take this herb instead of this drug. In fact, 2 years ago, I had a knee replacement because I had a horrible water skiing accident. So I had to have a knee replacement. And, I'm a person in my 60s. I've never had surgery. I don't take any medications. And so when I realized that I couldn't heal this naturally, which kind of killed me a little bit. But you know what? You can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Modern medicine has amazing things to offer us. And I met with an orthopedic surgeon. I didn't really click with him, so I met with I went with another orthopedic surgeon. There was some things that I didn't, and so then I met with the third orthopedic surgeon, and part of the reason I kept seeing a different surgeon is because I said, well, here's they laid out this, here, you're gonna have to take this for pain, this for inflammation, this for an antibiotic. And there's a list of prescription drugs that you take when you come out of surgery like this. And so I said, well, how about if instead of for pain and inflammation, I do that, how about if I do this and I do this herb? And I had a whole layout of what I wanted to do. And the third surgeon I talked to, he truly listened to me, besides the fact that he was a good surgeon. But he listened to me. He so he had to do a little bit of research on a couple of the things that I was wanting to do. But then he said, wow, you really know what you're talking about. This looks great. And so I think that what's happening, so that, let me think about that. Like, think about a person who's a surgeon, and he's in his mid-60s. So he's been a surgeon for a long time. He's very skilled, but he was open-minded, and he was willing to do a little bit of research on a patient with some information that a patient brought to him, who obviously had a different way of the way they treat themselves. So it was, I just think that the world is shifting so beautifully, and people are going, oh, wow. You mean my body heals just as well with this herb rather than this prescription drug, and there's zero side effects. I mean, that's the most beautiful thing about herbal medicine.
Absolutely, it is. I completely agree. There are lots of times in my life where I have benefited from modern medicine, but there are just as many times where I have been able to heal something naturally. So it's really great that those things can work in tandem. And like you said, the physicians who are willing to change their mind and be more open-minded are so valuable and infrequent.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. I think that people are starting to demand that. And I think that if we become more vocal instead of just rolling over and accepting what our doctor tells us, if we and we have to be willing to do some due diligence. And it can be a hassle to set up an appointment with a different person and try to find another person. And then you have to be willing to put in the work. And I think that as human beings, we need what modern medicine gives us. We can't just go, I'm not going to do any of that. Like trauma care, if you have a car accident, you can't put some herbs on yourself and you need to go let these people do what they do brilliantly. But I think for everyday things, or especially everyday things, we need to demand more. We need to be willing to be brave and stand up and say, hey, this is what I want to do. Are you going to be the person that's going to help me do that? And if not, then find someone else who will. And then the system will have to change because the people will demand it. That's my opinion.
I agree. And I think a lot of that is also based in getting yourself the knowledge, however you come about that. And I think your book will be incredibly helpful for a lot of people because, like you mentioned, you made it really accessible. And there's a lot of herbal books and medical textbooks out there, especially like this. Your book is much more geared towards like beginners, making it easier to understand. And there are some medicinal herbal books that are out there that are geared towards doctors. And it's a little difficult to understand if you are not in that field.
Oh, 100%. And that's the whole point. I mean, that is one of the reasons I wrote this book and put all the information together, is because I wanted people to realize that all of this is accessible to them, and it needed to be brought into a place where it was easy to understand. I mean, my grandkids can read it and understand it. So, that's where it is.
Yeah. And it's laid out in such a great way because, obviously 101 plants, you are not going to sit down and study this book in one go. That's not, the intention here, but you have it, nice contents page all listed out of, so you could just like refer to the chapter that you are having issues with. So, we mentioned the pain and inflammation, we mentioned the sleep and hormone health, like all of those are in separate spots. So you can easily flip to the section that you need that you're currently struggling with and see what those options might be.
Yeah. And, I mean, really the plan is, and if you notice that, I mean, I wanted to have really nice paper so you could, open it. And if you spill a little something on it, like your favorite cookbook, this should be something you pull off your shelf and go, I want it to be really well used, and just, I mean, I really want people to go, oh, what if I do this herb in place, if I have a fever, what if I use feverfew? and I make it really, really easy to do that. So that was the whole way I laid it out and put the information together. So thank you for noticing that.
No, I appreciate it because I like to come at it from the point of view of like when I was a beginner, because I was very overwhelmed very quickly
Hmm.
when I started with all of this, because there are so many like books out there that read like a textbook. And I was like, first of all, I feel like I'm back in school and I'm going to be graded on this and I'm going to fail. And also I still like, I have read 50 pages and I still don't know anything. And that was really frustrating to be at that point.
Yeah, no, and then I mean, I find that too, even though this is my world and I love all this, I can pick up a book and go, I'm just going to glaze over while I read this. I mean, I want something that engages me and makes sense to me, but doesn't take me down the rabbit hole of all of the, you know, the nuances of all of the components and the constituents and the polyphenols of all the plants, and that's all good. And there's a place, and there are people whose brains work that way. But I think for the majority of people, we don't want that. We want to say, let's cut to the chase and let's make it fun and really fascinating and really interesting. I mean, this is something that I think anybody can pick up and it can go, oh, well, this makes sense. And and we have to also really pay attention to that spiritual, intuitive side of us. When you hear information that is true, it resonates with you. We're given this gift of, I think it's magical, where we get a feeling. If something feels right, then that means it is. And I think that piece of us has been kind of beat out of us, because it's like we second guess everything. Well, no, our intuition, that higher piece of ourselves, gives us the answer, whether we should do something or not do something. And I've reached a point where I'm so in tune to that. If, there's only been one time it's happened as far as an airplane thing, but I told my husband when we first got married, I said, look, if we're ever somewhere, we're getting ready to get on a plane and I have a bad feeling about it, I just need you to know that I'm not going to be getting on. And it's only happened once, and there was a mechanical problem with the plane. Everybody was fine, but there was a big delay and a big thing, but I think when we tune into that on a level that is like, even when it comes down to what herbs make sense for any, food and everything, then it's a yes or a no. And it might be just a slight whisper. And I think first the universe will whisper at us and then it will yell at us. And sometimes we wait until the yell happens, which might be a hardcore disease or something. But yeah, I think that it's just all such a beautiful, magical place to be in, that I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
And I had a great time just flipping through because there's so many that I'm familiar with, but then there were ones that I'm not familiar with. And specifically out of that list, ones that caught my eye. And I'm like, okay, this must be like important to me for some reason. Like it's speaking to me for some reason. And now I got to figure out what it is.
That's exactly it. With all the hundreds and thousands of plants that are out there, this is a pretty special list to make it into this list. So
all important ones.
yes. I mean, there's a lot of really good, important plants. But what I wanted to do is really bring ones that, I mean, here's an example. Like they figure there's about 13 or 3 million different species of mushrooms. But out of those, there's been about 13,000 that have been identified. And then out of those, only about 12 mushrooms are medicinal mushrooms and that benefit human beings. So a mushroom did make it into the book. It's lion's mane, which is amazing. But think about that. Like, so there's thousands of plants. You can boil that down to 100 plants. And then these are the ones to focus on, that covers a wide range of a lot of the ailments that inflict us as humans. So this is, to me, an important list of really amazing herbs.
And speaking of the mushrooms and important plants, I was familiar with nothing except tobacco in your final section, which is psychedelics and sacred plants. I was like, oh, look at all of these new ones. I mean, I
Oh
knew
my
what
gosh.
it is, but not something I've worked with. So I was like, oh, this is like a whole list.
Yeah. In fact, how did I leave that out? There's actually two mushrooms, because there is a section, it's section 14, that is psychedelics and sacred plants. And I felt like this was really, really, really important. And, you know, I think people are surprised that something like tobacco made it in there, but there's a lot, there's a lot of really good things about the tobacco plant. And then there's a lot of good things about magic mushrooms and ayahuasca and cannabis and kratom and kava, all the things that are in this chapter. But if you notice, there's no preparation methods that are given, and there's no dosing. These are plants that need extra knowledge. They need, these are really special plants that have been used for thousands of years to help raise our consciousness, tune into our higher self. And this is making a huge resurgence. If you are paying attention to what's happening in the world, many, many people are realizing that psychedelics, if they're facilitated right and they're done with intention, can literally change this. I think it can change the world, and I think the world's ready for that.
I have been noticing that come up a lot more, and I've been getting, more questions about that. That's sort of how I get a feel for what's trending in witchcraft and spirituality right now, is based on what questions I get and how often I get them. And that is definitely on the rise of people being interested in that as a part of like their spiritual journey, and just sort of awakening different parts of their mind and body and how those can be used for those things.
Oh, 100%. In fact, I've had a couple of really beautiful, intense, very intentional plant medicine journeys. And once you tap into that higher part of yourself, it's almost like when you see something, you can't unsee it. So once you get access to that beautiful higher consciousness piece of yourself, you never lose access to it. And if you look at the history of plant medicine, and you look at the history of some of these things like, LSD, MDMA, psilocybin, you look at how they've been criminalized, and you look at the history and you really do the research about it. In fact, there's a really good series, you might have seen it, it's on Netflix, called How to Change Your Mind. It was written based on a book that was written by Michael Pollan. And he's a very famous food writer. He wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma, but he wrote this book in 2019, and they made a 4-part series on Netflix. And it talks about 4 different psychedelics. He experienced some of them himself. And he talked about the history of why these things were criminalized, and the time in human history when all of these young men, mostly young men, were getting, they wanted them to draft in the war, the Vietnam War, and they were becoming enlightened, and they didn't want to go somewhere and kill their what they realized was their brother. They realized we're all one. So you have this group of people who were at the perfect age to send off to war, and they're becoming enlightened, and they refuse to go. So hence the war on drugs started. So you really look at the history of this. It's like, if you have a huge group of the population that is now enlightened, and no longer controllable, the world shifts very fast, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. I think we're at the start of the most amazing time in human history.
I have not seen that one. I need to log on to Netflix and check that out. But I did take a bunch of sociology classes in college that just affirmed everything that you just said about the history of the war on drugs and everything, and
Yeah.
that, has shaped our legal system and criminal system, and how that's, still happening today. So I do remember having so many classes on that all came to that same conclusion. So fascinating to see how everything comes together in my life.
Yeah. I mean, it's seriously, if anybody has any type of anxiety about the state of the world, I just say, oh, this is the most exciting time to be here. I think we chose to be here, and I think we were chosen to be here, because this is, human history is not just in the US, but globally. We are more connected. We're more enlightened. I mean, it is a beautiful time to be alive.
It is absolutely wild time to be alive.
Yeah.
I go back and forth on that every day where I'm like, the world is a terrible place to be and I don't want it anymore. And then like other times where I'm like, everything is fascinating. I can't believe it.
Yeah, well, I think it's good to realize, we're all human. We dip into those places of lower frequency. And then when you realize, okay, well, it's all part of it. It's all part of the journey, right? And you wouldn't be a human being if you didn't dip into those places. And I have those moments myself, but at this point, I come out of it extremely quickly because it's like, okay, especially with these plant medicine journeys I've been on. Like I said, I've really had a couple of small ones, but two big main ones, and they shifted me. You never become the same. So yeah, I get where you're coming from.
And I just wanted to mention, mostly we were chatting about your book, but I did also want to mention that you have a company beyond your book. So if people are reading this and accessing it and feeling like, okay, this is, fantastic information, but maybe I still don't want to do it myself. You do sell a lot of the products.
Yeah, I mean, so my dad, like I said in the beginning, my dad passed away 26 years ago, and he had a company, he ran during his lifetime. And his business kind of died with him because he was the botanist. He was the one, he was educated as far as he had his degree in medicinal botany. And so when he passed away, and he died very young, he was only 62. And so now I'm older than he was when he passed away, but none of us were really prepared. And 4 years after he passed away, I restarted his company with a small group of tinctures, so herbal liquid tinctures that he made. And so I've been going now 22 years, and I not only carry on this small line of what he did, but now I've expanded it because, what I find is that the older I get, and the fact that I'm not on any drugs and there's so many people searching, and you're right, some people just simply don't want to go out and dig up a dandelion root and make their own dandelion root tincture. So I mean, I respect that, because there's a lot of that I do some of my own stuff because this is what I do, but there's a lot of stuff that I don't do. I just get it because it's easy. So yes, I 100%.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. There are some things that in certain plants that I just love playing around with and they're easy access for me. And then there's other ones where like I just am not familiar enough yet and I don't feel confident enough, or they're not available in my area. And I just don't want to go through all the effort of like sourcing and doing everything. And then I'm like, you know what? This is a finished product. And right now I need that.
Yeah, and the sourcing is a really big deal. I mean, we go through a lot to source every single raw ingredient that goes into everything we make. Because we have some things that come from different parts of the world, and it goes through a whole testing process to make sure that, first of all, it's the right species. We test for heavy metals, we test for microbes, and then after it goes through this really comprehensive lab test, it goes into a bit of a quarantine. We set it aside, and then while the lab test is being done, and sometimes there's raw materials, raw herbs that we send back to the source where we got it from because it didn't pass the expectations. So there is a whole thing that goes into sourcing these herbs that go in, especially with what I do. I'm not going to put out something that I wouldn't give to myself, my kids, or my grandkids. I'm not going to, I take my stuff. So I'm going to make sure it's the highest quality. There's no crap in it. There's no fillers. Everything is, yeah, we even use organic tapioca veggie caps rather than gelatin caps to for the capsules we make. Cause I don't, I want to take the very best thing into my body. And I believe it's my responsibility to provide that for other people that want to take care of their health like that too. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal to do the sourcing.
It is such an important part of it. And yeah, that's why there's just some things that I'm just not going to do myself, probably ever, but that's fine because there's wonderful companies like yours that I can source things from.
Exactly. And I
Do all
have,
the heavy lifting.
right. And there's some things that I don't make that I want to supplement my diet with. And I do my due diligence and purchase from other companies as well. So yeah, it's a whole
Well,
beautiful thing.
it is. Jane, I want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing your knowledge and expertise and creating such a wonderful guide for, particularly for beginners, but anybody who is interested in this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. It was so fun to put together, and trust me, when it came from the printer, the finished version, like, wow, I was so full of gratitude that I was able to bring this, into the physical world. So thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And I love your platform. It seems like you're doing such a good job out there. So thank you.
Thank you. And listeners, I'm going to have everything linked in the show notes as always. So if you want to head over to witchwednesdays.com so you can find the book to order, Be Your Own Shaman. So you can find Jane online if you'd like to check out her store and everything else. And I will be sharing photos of the book because it's truly beautiful and you've got to see it. Of like all the inside, the cover, like how big and gorgeous it is. I just want to show you all of that. So those will all be linked in the show notes for you to check out. And that's everything that I have for you guys this week. I will see you all next week.
Need even more witchcraft in your life? Subscribe to Witch Wednesdays on Patreon and YouTube for all types of exclusive bonus content like spells, recipes, book reviews, and more, or even order personalized tarot readings and spells. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. And you can find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.